Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek. Episode 90. The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 13. Time Squared.
I don't know what I'm talking about. They're locked into a single intent, unable to change. Unable to alter any of your previous actions. I have to believe there's no other way. There must be one. But it would never work. What is it? What would never work? I have to leave. What was the other choice? We can't fight. We can't escape. We can't go forward. No. We can't go forward. That would destroy the Enterprise. Is that it? Was that the other choice?
I must leave.
No. Captain Picard! I cannot allow you to leave. Before we can go forward, the cycle must end.
It's got Star Trek episode 90.
Yeah.
Wow.
90th episode.
Wow. We're almost at 100. Well, we ought to do something special for 100, I suppose.
Can we have some cake?
Yeah. I mean, that's not special for our listeners, unless listeners enjoy we're listening to us eat cake.
Do a video podcast.
They can enjoy it. They can
watch
enjoy us getting intoxicated on cake. Like in those, when the radio show does the drinking episodes.
I think we did a drinking episode.
Or we just,
You weren't there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were out. Jesse and I traveled to Ireland and went to an Irish pub to discuss
sweet.
voyages.
It was noisy.
Fairhaven and Spirit Folk.
And you had their Guinness.
No, we drank a bunch of Irish whiskey, actually.
Right on.
A variety of Irish whiskeys. So we'll have to do something special for episode.
Did you go to the cliffs
100.
Did you go to the cliffs of Dover?
That's in England.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
I just, it's a song. It's this like song that's all the guitars are like.
Oh, right, that song,
Yeah.
Star Trek.
Yes.
Time Squared. The Next Generation.
Did you catch a whiff of them bowls? Those bowls that Riker was using. All the dishes in the
A whiff of them?
all the dishes in the Trek world are crazy. But I would tell you, those mugs with the wide bottoms, those were good. But those bowls were all rolling around stupid. I'm just saying. But they're.
You really ought to be sitting out on a front porch somewhere. Explaining this to passersby.
About why their bowls are stupid.
There's a couple of things to discuss, I think, about this opening bit.
Well,
Yeah, there's a lot to discuss about this fucking opening bit.
I just want to say that Trek picks they put a unique effort into the dishware that they choose on the show, and I appreciate that. It's pretty cool.
And apparently it was a heck of a job, though I'm sure fun, for the prop folks to scour all the thrift stores and yard sales and where they would get the most unique stuff at those types of places.
That's pretty cool.
But it only became aggravating when they had something that they liked and wanted to reuse, but obviously you often need more than the one prop, and then so the thing they got for a few dollars would cost them hundreds of dollars to replicate. Yeah. All right, so what are some of your complaints? I want to leave it to you all because I have not complaints about this episode, not complaints about this first scene, just some stuff that is fucking perplexing about this particular opener with Riker, the eggs.
When it starts out, Dr. Pulaski comes in and says something about omelets, but he didn't make omelets. He just scrambled some eggs.
Everyone's talking about omelets. Everyone's talking about he's making omelets, and he's not making fucking omelets.
He didn't make any omelets, and he just made scrambled eggs in there.
He made some half-ass scrambled eggs.
They're just plain. He didn't put anything in them.
He just cracked some alien eggs.
But that brings me vegetables.
What the fuck was that?
And so that brings me to
hot sauce.
My point is like when Geordi was like, "Ooh," he made that face someone to make if something was like too spicy, but he didn't put any spice in there. So what was Geordi wincing at?
Well, they were alien eggs.
It was a disgusting egg.
It was just a weird egg.
They were from a weird animal.
He said there was O1 eggs.
O1, yeah.
So we don't know if anyone's ever had O1 eggs before, but like apparently you can eat them. I don't know, but Worf thought they were Warriors eggs. You could tell because like he was digging them.
It was funny to watch Michael Dorn just scarfing down was obviously just some scrambled eggs.
Worf probably doesn't eat chicken.
And Riker was giving him some look while he's doing it at first. Like at first Riker was like, "What is this motherfucker doing?" And then he was like, "Delicious." Yeah. Then he's like, "Ah, cool." But anyways, my point was I was talking about how they were making faces, but like you said, they didn't put anything in them. They were Pulaski was walking in there with some beer. It looked like a 40 ounces.
Right. So is it
That was some sort of whiskey.
is it really breakfast? It's not really
Yeah,
breakfast.
it's
They're just getting together because Riker like found these eggs and he's like, I got real eggs and I can cook them.
getting together because they're commanding?
I'll make you an omelet.
Their commanding officer pressured them into hanging out in his quarters, eating some alien bullshit that he did. He's all acting like he's a good cook, and they're all like, "Whoa, where'd you have a deft hand? Where'd you learn to cook?" He didn't fucking learn to cook because he can't cook fucking eggs.
Yeah, how do you fuck up eggs? But I mean, the thing
As
is,
I recall,
just,
Picard, he fucked up the pizza too, didn't he? Like burn the
yeah.
tomatoes on the pizza.
and they was too small.
Oh, that's right.
But so are we going to assume that the eggs tasted bad just because they were from a weird alien?
That's what I was going with. I didn't necessarily think that Riker was a
Because he
bad
did say
cook.
he did because
I'm basing it on the fact that he's saying he's making omelets, and then all he's doing is cracking an egg and sort of lightly wiggling them. He didn't like whisk that shit up or nothing proper. I mean, he whisked it a little bit. But it was all slow whisking.
That is a problem.
How do you float? You don't get the air bubbles in there.
Some
If
sort
you
of
don't whisk
like
it fast enough.
prop versus script conflict there.
Well, he was saying a cook's only as good as his ingredients, but that's kind of presumptuous because, like, he's blaming his ingredients for holding him back, and it's obvious
I think he was completely unfazed by the whole thing. He's like, "Well, I'm not the cook. I don't give a shit. Like, I got you guys to come over here and make some eggs.
That's
And,
what
you
his
didn't
real
like it.
goal-
I don't care. Like,
Yeah,
then,
his
like
whole-
they get someone to the bridge, and it's like, well, I got something else to do now.
His whole deal is
so do
getting
you guys.
is getting people to like follow his orders.
I think Riker.
that's all he cares about.
Riker, I love Riker, but sometimes he acts sort of like your typical like empowered white male. In that he's handsome, he's got a position of authority, and he just is like, oh yeah, I'm good at cooking fucking omelets. Check this out. And the people are like, all right, I bet he's not even any good at trombone.
Oh man, can't
He's
say
not
that.
that great.
He's just like tooting a loon. Everyone's like, oh, you're great at trombone.
Pulaski, yeah. Do you see the door shut in her face too?
There was multiple things with the door where
yeah.
everyone's coming in and the door keeps closing. It
Yeah.
was like a supermarket
and
where it's all like,
she was saying that we've gotten away from breaking bread by making friendship and community through breaking bread. I don't know. I didn't know what they meant by that. Does she mean they just don't eat together anymore?
It didn't make sense because that's what that means. They do eat together. They eat together all the time. It's just
Yeah, they
replicated
do.
food. And
It's just they
synthahol.
don't make it. Yeah, they don't make it like in the same way they get the.
I think they just don't. Nobody ever eats with Dr. Pulaski because she's unpleasant.
She's always trying to put people in their place. She's like, if the captain doesn't do what I want, I can just relieve him of duty because I'm a doctor.
Okay.
Can you do that? Can you do that? Like, why wouldn't it be up to Troy if someone was going to make that decision that he wasn't mentally capable?
That's
Wouldn't
a
that be a
Troy.
Troy decision?
Yeah, but traditionally it's the medical officer.
Yeah, so-
the Navy tradition is the doctor, but
Yeah, so that's what I was wondering because I'm not clear on that. But you're saying that is how it is in the
Yeah,
military.
Troy can like magically tell by reading his mind whether he's like
and
It's weird to-
they've used this in Star Trek before. McCoy mentions it.
It seems outdated though to use like a medical doctor to try to like say if somebody's mentally fit or
this
not.
This was 1989.
Yeah.
So they were imagining the future, but they
But I
maybe
mean-
weren't imagining hard enough.
But I mean, that's how it is in real life, apparently, and I think that's.
I at least in some scenarios it is, and I must state that I do like Pulaski. I like the character of Pulaski. However, they make it hard for you to like her because she's always like
she's a fine officer.
She's always treating Data like shit, and in this
Yeah.
case, it's effectively there's a brief period where she appears to be considering a mutiny against Picard. I know it's not technically a mutiny because she has the authority, but the way the audience receives it is that this character is a threat to Picard's decision making, right? So and it's kind of weird in this episode because this episode, which we've done very little to describe yet, but there is that moment where not only does Pulaski talk to Troy about the fact that she can do this and that this is sort of into consideration, towards the end, when she and O'Brien come and they see future Picard all like slumped over in the shuttle, it seems like that's the next scene is going to be her trying to take Picard out of commission and him having to argue like, no, I figured it out finally. I figured out the deal. But it doesn't happen. So I don't know. It was just an odd way to write her in this episode. It's just sort of antagonistic.
This whole episode felt like it was one of those things where the ending could live independently of a different episode because all the stuff that was happening, I don't even know if I'd call it it almost felt like a red herring. It's like but it wasn't even quite that because it didn't really lead you down a path. It was just they were musing about things, you know. They were like talking about like, well, maybe the alien wants this. Why is the alien here? What does it want to do for us?
Nobody knows really what happened.
Like nothing. There's nothing, and I understand. I respect that maybe don't need to explain everything that happens, but what happened?
I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that's cool, but I think that they can focus on. I don't know. The episode was really about Picard and him having to deal with self-doubt and an impossible situation where he has to look at this version of himself that he's like, I see nothing in common of myself with this guy. Basically, him trying to distance himself because all that
he looks disgusted at one point.
Yeah, he was disgusted. For all he knows, he's like a coward
Picard.
and like
Look at me.
and he's all fucked up and a coward. And so Picard felt really insecure about that. It was just sort of like trying to Picard like. But nothing was sort of made. There was no effort to make. They kept talking about you got to break, do something different, right? But what did they really do that was different? All he did was shoot Picard and kill him, right?
Well, he had an
shot
extra
him.
Picard this time. Right?
And why did he fucking kill him? I guess just to make doubly sure that nothing happened.
I'm not even sure that he meant to kill him. I mean, it's a little unclear whether because remember this future Picard was out of whack already. I know he was quote unquote getting better, but they don't.
And that didn't make sense either. Like, why does Pulaski know?
Okay.
Like when
he was
he's
sticking it to Pulaski because
they're-
he was like, Pulaski, come and get your patient. I shot him.
I think there's two things going on here.
They apparently don't know how time travel much. When was the last time there was
They
time
didn't know
travel?
about. They should have known about the flux capacitor because that was a few years before this aired.
Was the last
which
time?
is what makes time travel possible.
Was the last time they used time travel? It was in TOS or was
No, it would have been Star Trek 4, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's what I mean,
in terms of the Trek world, because Star Trek 4
Yeah.
came out in '86.
Yeah.
And this
Because they mentioned something about.
Yeah, I totally forgot about the movie. Yeah.
I mean, they did some other.
There was a mention here about shooting around a planet, slingshotting around a star, or
which is
something.
the Star Trek 4 style.
And that was
the
weird.
TOS
Can a
style.
non-warp ship go to warp?
No.
I thought warp wasn't just a speed. It was like aren't you fucking up the fabric of shit?
And they state that in this episode that the shuttle couldn't have done that because it can't do warp.
But Riker talks about, well, what if we slingshot? Or no, Picard or Riker.
Well, Riker mentions the slingshot, but Picard then makes the point. He's like, yeah, but it doesn't have warp, so you need warp to get even up to the point. But I think there's a couple things going on here. One is that this is still early enough in TNG and early enough in sort of the sci-fi genre, or at least the popular sci-fi genre, where it was okay to do sci-fi, quote unquote sci-fi things without any particular explanation, right?
Yeah, I
so
totally
for,
agree.
for like the positive energy versus negative polarity of the energy.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense. That
didn't make sense, but at least you could be like, well, maybe I just don't know enough about electricity. But then the medicine works backwards?
Yeah, it's like because everything was out of phase in terms of time. What about
that? Doesn't make any sense.
Like, yeah, she was saying they're out of phase.
He's
with
not
themselves.
traveling backwards in time.
So how could he went backwards in time, but Star Trek 4
No, I know, but he's not like continuing to travel backwards in time. Right?
Yeah, he's just there, right? And there's been no establishment before or since that they haven't really talked about this idea that when you go through time you become this weird like out of phase character where stimulants make you fall asleep and the negative polarity makes the shuttle positive. Why does it matter? I know those things. A lot of those things. At a certain point they do push it to the edge. You're just like, come on, that's enough. But it's okay not to focus on that. But if you're not going to focus on that, then why put so much focus on all these ideas that don't go anywhere?
And I think I have a more concrete explanation in addition to the one I just provided, which is a behind the scenes thing that I read on Memory Alpha that suggests that the writer Morris Hurley, he wrote the story. Apparently, he was actually really annoyed because, as originally conceived, this episode ended with Q appearing and basically saying, I did all this to fuck around with you and test you. And it being kind of like a rough draft version of what ends up happening in All Good Things. If you recall, in All Good Things, Q ultimately is testing Picard to see if he can apprehend a paradox. Mm-hmm. Now, this isn't quite a paradox, but this is kind of, can Picard do the opposite of what he thinks he should do?
Real quick, it's funny to think like, if Q was involved, this would make a lot more sense.
Exactly. Because Q was written in to be the reason why all this stuff was going on. Yet another in the tests, in the long run of tests. I mean, this would have been early on, of course, but the tests of Picard and or humanity by Q. But Gene Roddenberry apparently insisted that it be removed. The writer was really annoyed by that because he was like, the ending doesn't make any sense without Q. I wrote this ending for Q and it doesn't make any sense. So supposedly that was an aggravation that Maurice Hurley had.
What was it at the end was like Picard was saying something to that effect, wasn't he? He was just saying like, was this a test or was this anything? Because it didn't really make
Was
sense.
a conscious entity in control of this? There's a line earlier on about that where maybe a conscious entity is controlling these events.
Yeah, and because it seems like there would have to be a cue, because this episode, it's like, well, don't leave the thing, go through the thing. Why? Does it really need to scan you or kill you?
Yeah, that's what the writer said. He's like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why would going through the thing work now?
Yeah, right. It's like, well, either we scan you or we're gonna kill you. But when they're talking about, like, when they go back in time, when he goes back in time, right? That was the warning that some bad shit was gonna go down. And so it would be kind of a coincidence to have this time shit happen, like. It's like always like, oh, we got this anomaly that should have killed us in 2 seconds. Luckily for us, someone from the future appeared out of nowhere and decided, hey, this is going to happen. And the dilemma, of course, is should we do it or shouldn't we do it? Because we don't know who to believe. But that's still better than not having anything, maybe. I don't know. That's the question, right? Is it better
Hey,
for
that's the question.
Picard to know? Or
Write us in
Picard
that feedback at itsgotStarTrek.com and let us know if that is indeed the question.
Is it better for Picard to have heard the future, or better for him to have heard or not heard the future? I say it's better for him to have heard the future, because that way, for some reason,
Well, it's not just hearing the future. He has a spare Picard. I mean, I know he doesn't use it.
He has a
ends up
spare
just
Picard.
He's shooting him, but he does have that spare Picard.
They used
could've-
Patrick Stewart's twin brother,
they
Steve.
They could have tossed him out the back.
Steve Stewart.
Steve Stewart. Sorry. But yeah, they could have just tossed a future Picard out the airlock and been like, all right, here you go, alien.
Yeah.
Didn't work? You want another one?
I think
Maybe that'll work. Maybe they'll just pile up.
Picard was planning to kill that dude all along, I think, because that's why I
He
noticed
wanted to from the get-go.
he hated that guy. And yeah, at the end he was like, don't bother us. Don't call us. I'll call you. Leave us alone. We need to be alone for a minute. And he knew he was going to shoot the guy. He was like, if this guy doesn't tell me what the other option is. I don't know at what point Picard got in his head that there was a second option, but
It's kind of funny though, because he's Picard, and if the other Picard thought of the other option, why didn't this Picard? Now you could say this Picard didn't think of that option because his timeline has been interfered with by the presence of future Picard coming back and confusing him, so he doesn't think to come up with the other idea, but it's still his own idea.
Precisely. You know, before he went to the sickbay for the final time, he was giving the fucking saying to Riker, it's like, you know what? I think I need to get in the shuttle and leave.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's exactly what you're not supposed to do. That's the one thing you don't do is you don't get in the shuttle. No, but I have to do it to save the Enterprise. Didn't you see what happened?
But Troy is all like, yeah, he wants you. And he's like, do you think it would help if I left the ship? And she's like, yes, I totally do.
Yeah, I know.
Or
I
I like
know.
it how they wanted to like stay and study the vortex, and like they were like,
No, maybe we should leave.
yeah, it's like maybe we should leave. It's like, no, don't you want to see what it's like? It's like they just can't help themselves. It's like, this is the
they can't,
Enterprise. Like
right.
we're supposed to be seeing
But-
what's up here.
But I was gonna say that when he got to the sick bay and the other Picard, that last few scenes, by the way, was very confusing to try to figure out who was saying what for whatever
When
reason.
they're in the turbo
Oh, it
lift.
was, yeah.
They're all
Yeah.
walking up and down the hallways.
It was
Yeah.
messing with me.
Yeah, but
The future Picard was the one who was all refusing to look at the other Picard.
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
So P2, future Picard, he was
P2.
P2. So he was saying like, I got to get to the ship. I got to get to the shuttle. I got to go back out. I got to go back to the ship. I got a shuttle. And then Picard goes,
You sounded like Jackie Mason for a
I
second.
got a shuttle.
Who just passed away last week.
But Picard says, don't go back there outside, right? Don't do that because you did that before and you saw what happened. It's just going to happen again. So Picard was right to say that to him. But 5 minutes earlier, he left the bridge basically saying, I'm going to go in the shuttle
Well,
and get out there. So he wanted to go
yeah.
to the shuttle, but then he saw himself and decided,
Here's
wait, no,
the
let's
deal.
not go to the
It's
shuttle.
subtle, but
it's easier to tell someone else to do something than to like make
Yeah.
yourself do it. And the hard decision was not going in the shuttle.
Your point is a good one. However, on my second watch, and I've seen this episode a million times before, but we're really watching it closely for you guys. And on my second watch, the vibe I got was that Picard is asking those questions, but if you look at the way Stewart is portraying it, he's not going to do that. He's saying, okay, you're telling me to do this, and my feelings are saying to do this, and he walks right down to the shuttle bay and doesn't do that. So I think what we're meant to understand, but is clumsily conveyed or not conveyed sufficiently, is that that's what's happening. That we're meant to think he's going to go do the same thing, but actually he's already decided at that point, I know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do that.
Just like he had already decided at that point that he was going to...
I'm going to torture my twin.
He was going to do mean things to his twin, right? So I guess he had the whole thing planned at that point. I would be willing to buy that was just a ruse, but like, why did he need to lie to his? Why did he even need to say it though?
For dramatic effect. I mean, I agree. It's a bit clumsy, and I think when you think about this, right, this plot is extremely similar to Cause and Effect. Mm-hmm. The season 5 TNG episode.
But that one, like everything's so compact in that one.
Yeah.
That one, was just
so that's season 5.
That one's Cause and Effect is when they do the iterations.
There are
right?
significant differences, but we first of all we discussed that
We totally did that
at length in episode 29. Of
yeah,
the podcast.
that was the one where they kept cycling through
the main difference in Cause and Effect is that as the audience, when we're watching Cause and Effect, we know what's going on. Mm-hmm. The crew does not. So we are watching the crew slowly figure out and work through the process that they are stuck in a time loop. But in this episode, the audience is just as in the dark about what's going on as the crew is. So the vibe is different. I find this episode to be much more like tense and disturbing and upsetting somehow. The Cause and Effect is really, it's tension filled, but in a different way. And I think it is a much better episode. I think it's a much more refined episode. I really enjoy this episode, but I think I enjoy it better thinking of it almost as a first draft of what Cause and Effect did. Because Cause and Effect took sort of a similar-ish premise that the Enterprise gets destroyed at some point in the future. Some of that information goes back in the past somehow, and the crew has to cobble together a way to avoid that fate. But that this one has a lot of loose ends and things that they didn't pick up on or information they didn't convey clearly enough.
So you find that you enjoy Time Squared more than you enjoyed Cause and Effect?
No. Cause and Effect is a better episode. It is
okay. I thought you were saying this was the better.
No, the opposite.
Okay.
Cause and Effect. This is the one that has all sorts of loose threads and problems, right? It's a second season episode. They're still working out the kinks.
But what you're talking about, the detention that they had was like not present in Cause and Effect, and that was cool. But Cause and Effect was just, it was such a tight compact episode.
It was so well written.
And there wasn't all this. There wasn't extraneous stuff. This was like
exactly.
This was like the episode of no payoffs.
This episode, they spend almost a full minute bringing the shuttlecraft into the bay. Right. And I it's not that I didn't enjoy it. I do enjoy the slower pace of the episode, but I was thinking about that. I was like, okay, we're just watching Picard give orders saying like, okay, so we'll do the tractor beam.
Oh, and then the second one,
open the door, and then you see it slowly coming in. And then the doors are like opening and closing.
I liked how it was like flipping around, and then it got all level with like the universe from the first tractor beam. It was perfectly level. Why did they need that second one? Because that first one could get it where it needed to go, and why would they need a second one?
You got to see the actual tractor beam emitter.
They needed more action in that scene, so they added a second tractor beam.
I think in 1989, this probably blew people's minds.
Yeah.
I was a kid when I watched this, but I don't remember if my mind was blown or not.
How about that shuttle bay, huh? You'd think there'd be more doohickeys and wrenches and things in there.
Not on TNG. They keep it clean and smooth.
There's two
carpeting.
consoles.
Sometimes
maybe there's probably 4.
Sometimes they have funny boxes and containers.
They probably have like eight consoles. I wonder what kind of room they used for that. Like just some studio warehouse.
That's
room?
A set. Yeah, that's a standing set.
They built that shit.
Yeah. They built that shit.
Yeah, they did.
I don't know. All they had in that shuttle bay was one fucking shuttle. If you don't count future shuttle, they had one shuttle. And what's the deal with shuttles?
What's the deal with shuttles?
What is the deal?
Which ones are the runabouts? Are the runabouts the tiny?
No, runabouts are only on Deep Space Nine. Those are bigger than shuttles.
Right. So that's what I was going to ask.
They're warp capable. They've got weapons.
Okay, so that's what I was wondering. Does TNG only have those 2-seater kind of shuttles? Does it not have bigger ones?
They have bigger ones that come in later that are sleeker and look less TOS-y.
But those aren't runabouts.
They're not runabouts. A runabout is a particular type class.
It's a tiny little fighter train.
It's like a big shuttle.
It's not meant to be a fighter.
It's not meant to be a fighter, but it can like defend.
We
itself.
only ever see them fire once, which is in the one little ship or whatever, that DS9 episode.
But if you were traveling to get to the planet or something, and some asteroids got in your way or some shit, you could blast it.
Exactly, and you'd prefer that to a shuttle. I think the idea is that runabouts are more capable and more fun. They can go longer distance.
They got like ATVs.
Yeah, they got. I know they have a transporter pad in them.
Whoa, they got they're decked out with its own transporter pad.
They're ready to go.
That's
And
pretty
You can
hardcore.
beam onto that shit.
Beam out of there.
beam
Some
in,
shit
beam
goes
out,
sour.
Fuck out.
beam around.
They should just put the transporter pad on the seat so you can just beam out of your chair if you need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
I mean, that might make me nervous being like, I could get beamed out
You
at
don't
any
have to use the
second, but
bathroom. You can
beam
just-
that. Well, you can
Beam
get
out your-
beamed out
yeah,
anyway.
beam
You
it
can,
out
be,
your
you can beam
bladder.
from any. You can beam from anywhere.
You can beam out your bladder.
You don't need the transporter pad.
transporter
You
pad.
can beam anywhere.
You don't need a transporter pad to beam out your bladder.
Beam
Beam.
Beam out your bladder.
But a big difference. A big
Don't need a
difference.
transport pad to beam out your bladder.
What is this?
Beam out your bladder.
That's another thing you could extol to people as you sit upon the porch, and the people walk along the sidewalk. You go, beam out your bladder.
Are you one of those porch guys? No,
Beam out your bladder.
Beam out your bladder.
Beam out your bladder.
It's like, what is he talking
Don't
about?
mind
gotta-
him,
he's gotta-
honey. That's just Dan.
Keep
gotta-
walking. Keep
He's
walking.
harmless.
Beam out your bladder.
He's harmless. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, episode. This episode is just a pile of unpaid bills. There's no payoff.
I think it works in the end. I think you can see the seams. You can see it sort of bursting at the seams where when you know Q was supposed to be in it, that retroactively makes things make more sense. You can also see where it's fluffed out a little bit because, TNG, of course, went at a slower pace than some of the modern iterations of Star Trek, but not always the motion picture style slow thing like with the shuttlecraft, for example. So it seems like it's padded out a little bit, maybe too. Like they had the 3/4 or 5/6 of a story, and they just had to fluff it out a little. No problem. They have to do that all the time. But I do think it impacts this in terms of classicness level. On the other hand, though, I do enjoy this episode. I enjoy it partly because I think it creeps me the fuck out. I think Patrick Stewart's acting in this is really great.
Oh, that's fantastic. The scene where like
Both sides of him being all horrified on the medical table is upsetting.
you see some like Riker veins, I remember, in his head veins.
There's a tremendous
Riker
amount
vein.
of upsetting
So when,
tension in
when,
this episode.
one of my favorite scene, I think, is between
Your
him.
favorite?
My favorite scene is it was between him and Riker, and they were just having the lowdowns, getting what's up, and then at one
when
point,
Riker's all leaning forward.
yeah, the one where Riker's leaning forward. Yep, that one. But at one point, Picard sits down and he starts like musing, and he puts his head in his
Yeah,
hands.
he's all scratching his
Yeah,
head.
and that
stuff.
is like that whole exchange is just great.
It's wonderful.
because you can tell he's just musing about he's talking about some kind of Mannheim experiments, but he was talking about the Traveler, and
Yes.
it's like Riker's like, I don't think that's the case here. And
Riker's like, what the fuck? You think you're the
Yeah.
Traveler now, you asshole?
and
You
Picard
arrogant
just like
piece of shit.
and Picard just like spaces out for a second after he said that, and then he quickly just like points at him and goes, no. Like he's just like, I don't think that's
He's
the
like, he
case here.
thought about it,
No.
and he's like, nah.
No,
I,
you're
I
right.
probably
Of course,
didn't
you're right.
turn into a Traveler.
That didn't happen.
Yeah, so there was a lot of Picard sort of like thinking, and Captain, I think there is one instance where you should suppress your natural tendencies. Oh, really? It's just this whole beat, and
The Persian flaw.
yeah, that Persian flaw. I hadn't heard of that before.
Isn't that a reference to Alexander the Great or something?
Something about like Persians like to have flaws or something.
Something like that. Write us in at feedback at itsgotstartrek.com and
What's a Persian flaw?
illuminate us about the Persian flaw.
Oh,
Make us
it's-
feel better about saying that and because we're presuming it's not some horrifically racist thing to say.
It was basically people who make shit. They intentionally put a fucked up aspect in it to signify that man is flawed.
Did you look that up?
Yes, I did. I put it in my own
good.
words.
I was so nervous you just made that shit up.
No, yes, you're just making shit up. Yeah. No, Dan.
It's like,
That's what it is. And I was listening to some podcast or something, or somewhere where they were saying like there's a reason that
What's a podcast?
where New York has one brick wall, and the apartments have one brick wall, and the rest is something about making.
I don't understand the reference.
Have you ever seen a New York apartment before?
I've been in New York apartments.
Have you ever
before,
heard of the
yes.
idea that there's
New York City, New York, United States.
New York
Have
City.
you ever heard of the idea that a lot of them have just one brick wall? Like you see the bricks.
This is just made out of one big brick.
Well, no, I'm saying the rest of the wall looks like normal drywall or whatever painted wall, but then there's one red
Oh, you mean
brick
just
wall.
an exposed brick?
Exposed brick.
I
Yeah.
don't think that's limited to just New York City.
No, but I think it like according to what I heard this person say. They said
On a podcast.
They said it was it sprouted up in New York because of this idea of wanting to have one aspect of it like kind of fucked up to remind you that you're.
Can you just kick a hole in the drywall? Is that sufficient? Because that's kind of fucked up. You'll just have like that one fucked up hole in the drywall.
I have nothing to do with. I have no stake in this.
I'm just
in this
asking.
potato. So I don't know.
Wait a second. Do you put steak inside your potato?
That's a great idea.
Beef steak?
You want more steak to potato though ratio. You don't want a big old potato with a little steak in it. You want a big steak surrounded by a little potato.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about like
How do you get a
tater
big
skins.
steak into a little tomato? I mean, a little potato.
Little tomato. That's wild, man. You can use gastronomy to make eggs look like tomatoes or tomatoes look like eggs.
Alien eggs. But there was another point. In addition to Patrick Stewart's acting, which really, I mean, of course he's brilliant. He's always brilliant. But this was this really gave him an opportunity to do some interesting stuff, and made me repeatedly uncomfortable. Both contemporary Picard and future Picard both made me uncomfortable at varying times in this episode. However, I think the other thing that makes me really like this episode is that the actual sci-fi plot of it.
The sci-fi plot of it.
Sci-fi plot. That plot ain't right. The plot of having somebody time travel just 6 hours into the future, a short duration into the future, is so different than what we're used to seeing, because normally people are traveling, I don't know, 50 years, 100 years, or whatever into the past.
Even
or
Riker
the
was like,
future.
aren't we supposed to do this like 20 years from now?
Yeah.
Like, we're not supposed to go through 6 months.
Yeah, it's weird. And you don't see a lot of that. I mean, I don't know how much you saw of that in science fiction prior to this. Maybe you did, but I'm not familiar with that. Write us in at feedback@scottstartrek.com if you have any suggestions.
Of all the things I choose to find hard to believe, like ignore time travel and all that, who cares? What's the hardest for me to believe is that this was not involved. Q was not involved in this somehow.
Now that I put that in your head, right?
Yeah, well, no, but I was already thinking about
something along those lines.
Yeah,
right?
I wasn't thinking Q before. I was like, it didn't occur to me. Oh, Q would make sense.
There's zapping Picard, and there's no explanation for anything.
Yeah,
it's very Q-ish.
And I was just thinking, like, wow, it's really convenient that he was able to get back in time and warn him of this anomaly that has no warning to it. It's like this anomaly literally is happening, and they couldn't do anything about it, and the only thing that was warning them was Picard, who got sent back in time. It just seemed like a lot to believe. It seemed like a lot I had to put my faith in, and with Q, it's all good.
I agree. And but nevertheless, that being all that, putting that in a little nicely organized pile and setting it gently to the side where it can be referenced in the future as needed, that whole 6 hour thing was interesting because it was a different dynamic than we're used to seeing, right? It wasn't traveling back to the 1800s or forward to the 3000s or anything. You know, it was this very self-contained thing.
Do you want to see a gritty like Star Trek movie where they travel back to medieval times or something horrible, and
where they just phaser everybody?
Where and then people get gutted, and maybe they had to become They had to be a knight. Of course, Worf has to be a knight for some reason, you know, and
of course,
you know, just because he's a Worf, he's a warrior. You know, and he's got some kind of ball and chain flail.
Well, they do
Sounds
have
miserable.
There is.
It would be like all gritty, and weird gritty Star Trek.
You just keep saying gritty.
Yeah,
just
gritty.
Keep saying gritty.
That's just because everybody will be dirty because it'll be the.
But gritty
ages.
makes me think of a 1970s cop drama, gritty with film grain and you know.
Well, just make it in the
people
style.
Being racist.
Make it in the style of a 70s cop
French
drama.
Connection.
Make it in the style of a 70s cop drama, but put it in the medieval times with Worf as a knight with a ball and chain flail spike thing.
Would it just be Worf or anybody else?
Beverly would be there too.
It'd be Worf and Beverly Crusher.
Okay, well that's nonsense.
I'm down. I agree with Jesse. I'm now 100%.
Okay.
I was mocking you before if you didn't realize that, but now I'm 100% down. I'm 100% down for that. Make it a sitcom.
Yeah,
but still in a 1970s cop movie style.
Yeah, I
corrupt cop style.
That would get the people talking.
But in Deep Space Nine, they have that episode Visionary with O'Brien that does sort of a similar thing where there's two O'Briens separated by a brief period of time. So that's the other major example I can think of. It is another Star Trek example. I'm sure there are more out there that I'm either forgetting or haven't been exposed to, and I'd like to hear more about those. But the plot is interesting. It's cool. So that's a big plus. One major minus for me, and it shouldn't be, but it is.
I'm Major Minus. I like the idea. My name is Major Minus.
My Major Minus is my General Minus, my Lieutenant Minus.
Be like Lieutenant.
Remember
Lieutenant
when,
Commander Minus.
did you see a point where Riker said to Geordi, he goes, Lieutenant. There was a scene, I forget what it was. He's like, Lieutenant. Like he was trying to like tell Geordi, he's like, you're nothing. And I'm everything. Back to how he invited him to their shitty, just so he could give him shitty breakfast. He's like, I made them come over here for this bullshit.
Yeah, because he's Riker, and he's like he's basically like that character played by John Hamm in 30 Rock, where he's so hot and attractive that nobody has the heart to tell him that he sucks at cooking.
Oh man,
when sex, he's terrible at sex.
Oh no, Riker can't be bad at sex.
Yeah, he even doesn't know how to sit down properly, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's so cool how he sits down."
You remember that
Puts
Bob's
his leg over it.
Remember that Bob's Burger episode with Fred Armisen? He's all like, "I'm good at sex."
Yes,
you're bad at sex.
That's an excellent episode of Bob's
very
Burgers.
good at sex.
You are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, you're saying wait, your major minus.
My major minus is
Major minor.
my Colonel minus is
I just can't fucking stop.
Is
my ensign
I've gone
minus.
I didn't want to go to ensign. I thought, once you do lieutenant commander as Jesse did, it's hard to.
Greenhorn.
Ensign is less funny than lieutenant commander minus.
Greenhorn minus. Yeah, lieutenant commander minus.
Greenhorn? You mean like a private?
Lieutenant commander minus is probably funnier.
Yeah. Rear admiral minus.
Rear Admiral's a funny one.
Rear admiral minus.
Rear Admiral.
Okay, so
yeah, it is funny.
It is when
This is stupid.
when Data and Geordi are working on the shuttle and trying to get the power back working in the shuttle, and we already discussed the whole power inverted this way and that way, and they work out that they need to put reverse power or something in there somehow to make the shuttle work, and they're all like, that shouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah, why did? Yeah.
But that's not the minus. That's fine. That's sci-fi
Well, the
fun.
inverter-
That's 80s sci-fi fun.
You're
Whatever.
talking about how like everything the up was down and left
Exactly.
was right for some
It
reason.
was instead of positive, it was negative, and the polarity and the this and the that.
Real quick, another thing that sort of reminds me of why did they bother was when Geordi was showing the video of the Enterprise blowing up, and he was like, the video quality was pretty shitty, but with the phase inverter, it'll get better by a little bit. Why did they even bother with that?
Geordi's anal about these
Well,
things. And that's the kind of person you want working in engineering.
I think it was just an attempt to give you a sort of a vibe of the episode, give the episode a flavor, a certain aura, but it just felt like it was just something like these loose end where you're just like, why'd you bother with that?
It's characterization. This is for Geordi. They repeatedly show him going above and beyond. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from.
I'm just making that. I'm pulling that out.
Yeah,
out of my rear end.
It doesn't change.
Your rectum.
I thought I didn't think it was made much sense. But whatever, it just didn't bother me.
But that's not the minus.
That's not the major minus.
The major minus. And I remember this.
You remember the major minus?
As a child aggravating me.
He remembers the major minus.
I remember I was a child. I was a young child. I was watching Star Trek The Next Generation, and this aggravated me. And it was when the power comes back on, and Data does that sort of like move with his hands, where he's all like, "Oh,
well, because he because he solved the problem. He's like, there you go."
But he's like, he did that motion when something starts working, but you don't know exactly why. So you put your palms facing upwards towards the sky, and your hands out at about I don't know, what's that, a 35-degree angle or something?
Sure.
And you sort of wiggle them a little bit, meaning like, huh?
With that look on your, but it's a happy feeling.
It's like when you kick the mower and it starts, or you slap the side of your CPU.
It's confusion, but not bad.
Huh?
It's not angsty confusion. It's
Okay.
it's like serendipitous.
All right. Because it works.
Serendipitous.
It's like on the one hand, you're happy it works, but since you don't know exactly why
I don't
it works,
know why.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
It's bothering me, but I'm just
aggravating you.
so happy it works, though. That's all that matters.
But
what if it happens again? I won't be able to fix
just
it.
thinking that's not a Data motion, right? Data.
That's true,
Brent
yeah.
Spiner's still learning the Data vibe,
Right.
and in seasons 1 and 2,
Oh, right.
there
I
are a
see what you're
number of
saying.
things, and he did this in that
Because like it wouldn't because it
the one with the 1980s people, he did stuff like that too.
I mean,
where
you could
you're
just,
like, "Oh."
but you could just say, it's just.
Of course, you can
He's
say
just
he programmed
imitating.
himself
He's
to do
imitating stuff, and he's getting better at it over time, I guess. But yeah, I do see. Though the characters that happens a lot with shows where characters are actors are trying to feel out their
Getting into it.
characters,
Yeah.
and figuring out what it is that
It was
really
more
makes
like
what works and what doesn't. Because a lot of stuff is just stumbling around in the dark until you find something that works, and I bet that happens with like finding a character sometimes where you just keep trying different things until something hits,
or
and then
being
you're like,
lost
go with
in
that.
the woods at night.
That's probably why, like The Simpsons, you get like the idea where the first season the character is like fairly normal. Homer's fairly normal.
But
like,
his voice is all low and weird.
yeah, it's all weird. And then over time, it gets very like narrows down what their traits are. And then over time, they take one trait of the character and exaggerate it more and more. And then the original character was lost because they're just doing this sort of focusing. And that's what Homer did. Now he's just a bunch of like, I'm Homer Simpson, I'm fat.
The Homer singularity.
The homularity. So the homularity. So that would just kind of make sense to go along with the lines of, as you're an actor, you're figuring out your role that you're playing, and over time you sort of streamline certain aspects and cut out the unnecessary shit. I don't know. But yeah, Brent Spiner is pretty cool though.
Yeah. And that does not ruin the episode for me, but it jumps out at me. This is one of those episodes, and you see it a lot in the early seasons, where it's cracking along, you're enjoying the story, everything's fun.
Do you ever say cracking good time?
Yeah, you're having a cracking good time.
It's a
but
ripping good
then
time.
something just pops out at you, and you're just like, what? What the fuck was that? That was a little weird. And everybody does it at some point.
That's
all the actors early on.
I think that's how my issue with,
Except for Riker.
with whenever I try to watch Babylon 5, and I never watched that much because I kept trying to watch it, but whenever the CG at the time of the ships would come out, I know it's not quite the same thing as what you're talking about cerebrally, but I get this sort of my physical reaction is like, and there's a lot of bad CG, and the CG, it's passable, but at the time it was just so jarring to me because I was used to Star Trek style stuff that was a little bit held back.
Which at the time was primarily using models.
Yeah, right. And
Babylon 5 was pioneering in the CG, but also...
So it could just be Babylon 5 was pushing forward a frontier, and I wasn't ready for it.
And you wouldn't care so much...
Maybe I wasn't ready for Babylon 5.
You wouldn't
it was ahead of its time.
You wouldn't care so much about the CG now if you had ended up watching it. If you'd gotten into Babylon 5 at the time, it's similar to watching the original Star Trek, right? A lot of people who try to watch the original Star Trek now, even with the updated CG effects, sometimes they're like, I just can't. It's so difficult because of the costumes and the special effects. But if you watched it when you were young, your imagination wasn't bothered by those things, and your older self, mixed with some nostalgia, no doubt, it maybe can recognize that the special effects aren't very great, but that contextually they still work for you, right? But sometimes I think you can miss that boat. I have as a goal prior to the end of my life to give repeated and good sporting chances to these franchises.
There's thousands of Babylon 5 episodes.
Because
what about Farscape?
Farscape is another one where I recognize and respect the people who enjoy them, and so I really want to get into them. But the attempts I've made have not latched onto me. But I also must admit that the attempts I've made have maybe been insufficient due to largely to scheduling issues.
They had cool creatures. They had cool looking
Farscape
aliens.
had some cool stuff. Yeah, creatures and stuff.
It was something freaky that kind of scared me about that. But it was awesome.
Argue,
it was a weirdo show.
Even having not seen most of Babylon 5, I would argue that as anyone who's a Deep Space Nine fan should watch Babylon 5.
Babylon 5.
Because of the interesting background history of the production and development of both Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5. I'm not going to go into the details here, because I have insufficient knowledge, but having read a number of articles, there's just a lot of interesting stuff going on about how both of those shows about space stations came out at around the same time, and there are some similarities. There are mostly a lot of differences, and they go in different directions. But that they are both centered around that sort of conceit of staying put and having to deal with the fact that you are not traipsing around the galaxy, hopping from planet to planet or spatial anomaly to spatial anomaly. And there may be some interesting things to consider about why was that the case, that that concept coalesced in the early 90s, and the late 80s and early 90s, people started getting interested in that. Maybe there's social changes, political changes, geopolitical change. Maybe there's things that influence that. Maybe it's a coincidence. Who knows? But that's why, even though I haven't seen it yet, do as I say and not as I do. Go watch Babylon 5 if you like Deep Space Nine. If you're only about the TNG, I don't think you got to bother. Don't worry about it. What are you even worried about?
Don't even worry.
Yeah, there's a lot of good shows. That Battlestar Galactica was pretty good. I never saw the original though.
The new Battlestar Galactica.
I never saw the original one or Lost. I wanted to see
the 4400 was good. They're remaking the 4400.
I remember watching the original one as a kid, but I was a kid, so I didn't.
Did you ever see that Buck Rogers show?
Yeah, I watched the hell out of that show.
You ever watch Time Tracks?
I remember it for some reason.
Yeah, Time Jacks was some ridiculous shit.
Speaking of Star Trek, Quantum Leap was an awesome show.
Quantum Leap was awesome.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Yeah, and
Last week-
Sam.
Last
whatever.
week, was it last week or the week? No, it's the week before last
And then
week.
they had his.
We did Dear Doctor with Archer in his nice white shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Sipping on some iced tea,
Yeah,
looking out the window,
looking out
contemplating and shit.
Yeah, thinking about whether he should save that civilization or not.
But that's not this episode. This episode is Times Squared. Good old Captain Picard.
This is the podcast.
And they had
Good old Riker.
Archer and Scott Bakula. I forget the name of his partner in Quantum Leap. That dude,
The computer fella.
the dude who always had that
Dean
Ziggy. He had the
Stockwell.
Ziggy.
Yeah, Dean Stockwell's the
Yeah, I
actor,
can't remember.
but-
Yeah, Dean Stockwell. Okay, anyway,
forget the name of the computer.
And he had like Lorenzo Music and Bill Murray. That overflip. The Bill Murray Lorenzo Music thing is mind Mobius. It's just like
It is
totally
a mind
confusing.
Mobius.
But this
And if
is
you don't know what we're talking about, look it up. Bill Murray, Lorenzo Music, Mind Mobius. Put that into Google. You'll get everything you need.
yeah.
Don't even worry about it.
Don't even worry about it. So the thing with Dean Stockwell and Scott Bakula, though, that's just a simple. They were in a show together before, and then now Dean Stockwell made some appearances. It's like
Yeah, he was on Enterprise.
It's like that happened on, I think, Everybody Hates Chris, and they had the one who played Dina or whatever in Martin. Sorry, that's getting really. Never mind. Okay, let's
Who
back
all
to
out
it.
there watch the Fox Broadcasting Network in
They should
circa 1993?
Yeah.
My aunt.
should have called that show. Nobody watches this show.
Yeah.
I watched a lot of Martin.
I was talking about Everybody Hates Chris.
Oh,
Yeah.
that I didn't get to see. I heard it was good, but I didn't get to see it. Anyway,
Shenanigans.
so
I'm
this
just talking
is
shit
this is
about it.
it's got general TV
I like
topics.
Shenanigans.
All
And
right.
for some reason, he played some kid sometimes. In the opening sequence, he'd bring out his characters like Shanae and some kid who had snot coming out of his nose, and he'd do that trick where he would walk on his knees and have like make it look like he had shoes on his knees, so he was really short. And
This is that part when we do a podcast within a podcast.
Yeah, okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
but never, and you guys never let me do the green.
That's right, yeah.
I mean, fried green tomatoes. I don't know. Green Acres. We could do a Green Acres podcast. You guys might be more down for a Green Acres podcast than
No.
a fried green tomatoes podcast.
no, definitely that's not true.
Oh, you'd rather do fried green
The
tomatoes.
Green Acres gives me the heebie-jeebies. You know?
I watched the fuck out of some Green Acres.
Ugh.
Reminded me of my family.
I remember watching. Was hanging out with this family, and we were watching what show was it? The
Green Acres?
Green Acres, and then they watched Petticoat Junction. Too.
Ooh, Petticoat
And I was like, "What's
Junction.
Petticoat Junction?"
That's like the
Weren't
sequel
they
to
related?
Green Acres.
Yeah, they're
right.
they're like, you don't know what Petticoat Junction is, and I was
Yeah.
like, no, and it was just another one of those shows, and I was like, ugh, it's weird.
Man, you didn't get enough Nick at Night when you were a kid.
I watched a lot of Nick at Night.
but not enough apparently.
I watched like the Donna Reed show, like you.
Did you watch
Mr. Ed.
My
My
Three Sons?
Yeah, My Three Sons, and that Patty Duke show, and all
Patty
that.
Duke is all right.
Apparently, Fred. What was his name?
Fred Willard.
No, the guy who did
that's
My
the guy
Three
from-
Sons.
Fred McGuinn.
No, that's the guy from the Munsters.
The same guy.
No, it's a different. The My Three Sons guy is Fred
Leave-
McMurray. Fred
Leave-
McMurray.
Leave It to Beaver.
Fred McMurray is the
Oh,
My Three
that's
Sons guy.
right. I'm sorry.
And Fred McMurray
McMurray.
was really. I mean, he did movies at that time, and I think I was listening to the Gilbert Gottfried podcast or something. He was talking about Fred. We've gone way off
Yeah,
base here, but I'm going to finish this thought. Fred McMurray. They wanted him to do My Three Sons. But he mostly just liked playing jazz and like occasionally doing a movie.
I just want to play music,
I
Dad.
think he kind of made so much money in the movies. He was just like, I don't know. I bought a bunch of property and I play jazz or whatever. He just liked to jam out all the time.
That rules.
So he made some deal
What
with them.
instrument did he play?
I don't even remember, but it was cool. Whatever it was, apparently he was a brilliant musician.
Saxophone.
Like a proper. He just shows up at jazz clubs and can play on stage. Talented musician. So he made some deal where he's like, all right, I'll do the show, but you got to make it so I only have to like film like 2 days a week or something. And so they were like, all right. So I want to go back and watch that show again and see, because most of his scenes are him like sitting on the couch, like giving the boys some advice or something. And then it'll be like the boys and then like Uncle Fred or whatever, like getting into some shenanigans for a bit. And then Fred McMurray comes back and is like, oh, I see you got into some shenanigans. Did you learn a lesson?
Nah.
Anyway, it's got Nick at Night, memories from Nick at Night. We'll return now to the It's Got Star Trek podcast and our discussion of Times Squared.
John Ritter.
No, we've returned.
Oh,
John
we've
Ritter
returned.
is Three's Company and
He
Three's a
will.
Crowd.
He will never return.
Oh, that's
He
sad.
not in the Ropers. He was not in the Ropers.
He was not in the Ropers, but he was in Three's a Crowd. That only lasted a season.
That was a good show. Me and my friend were obsessed with the girl on.
There
Her
was
name
a
was like
show we
Vicky
had
or
where
what,
something.
with Three's a Crowd?
Yeah, there was her name was Vicky.
All right, we're back into It's Got Television.
No, we got to stop this, man.
I remember the Three's Company where
Three's a Company or Three's a Crowd?
no, where Three's Company where
this is terrible.
some robber left, I think it was in Chrissy's room or something. He left some like diamonds that he'd stolen, and
Where
then
are
they were all like, "Oh my God, there's these diamonds!" And Jack was all like, "They're not real diamonds." Or so one of them, maybe Janet was like, "They're not real diamonds. If they were real diamonds, they'd cut the glass." And then they like scrape it across the mirror, and it cuts it, and they're all. And then Jack is all like, "Oh."
And then someone only overhears like the most sketchiest part of their conversation and thinks something innocent is really bad, and then
Mr. Furley.
Yeah, that was like I remember the cutting the diamond thing on the glass. I remember one where they were like they broke this thing. They thought they didn't know if it was an original piece of vase artwork, and they got it and they looked at it and it broke, and they put it together and they're like, it's a wand tie. It's an original wand tie. And they're like, wait, no, it's backwards. And they switch it around. And they go, made in Taiwan. And that's what the episode ended on.
And it's a good joke because I laughed at that.
Yeah. So
I mean, I'm declaring it's a good joke because, I'm arrogant. I have an arrogant presumption.
I was like, wand tie.
That I can adequately judge humor. All right.
Okay. That's enough of that.
What are we talking about, Star Trek? Should we get on? Is it odds
They
and ends
should
time
have.
yet?
They should have.
I think it might be.
They should have
close to odds and ends time.
They should have floaty sick bay portable beds. Obviously, the budget couldn't handle it, but they
have them sometimes, even early on. But it's clearly
like a floaty thing.
Yeah. It's funny how, like in the pilot episode, for example, you'll see stuff that you don't see again because it's like it was clearly expensive to do.
Yeah, because I mean, really, everything should be floating. That's when you have tractor beams and all this shit. Why not just make everything float and then staying still with,
Also, do they have full gravity, or why not make it 0.95 gravity, 0.8 gravity? Make it a little easier.
Yeah, they can change gravity. Like in DS9, there was that episode, what's her name, who lived on that planet and she had weak muscles, and so her room, they had to make the gravity
Floaty. Her name was
Floaty McGee.
Yes, that was one of those episodes where Dr. Bashir hits on one of his patients.
Yep.
Uncomfortable.
And it's kind of like, oh.
The 1990s.
It's kind of like, oh.
1990s. Kids, go read about the 1990s.
Don't do
the
it.
Shuttlecraft 5, it was called the Elbaz, and it was named after this guy who was a scientist that worked on the Apollo program. His name was Farouk Elbaz. And he did a lot with studying the rocks that came back from the moon and planning where they were going to land on the moon. He's still around. He's just kind of old.
We should have him on the podcast.
And he got the idea of having, I guess, moon rocks on display that people can come up and touch and interact with.
I've done that.
And he got that because he's a Muslim, and he got that from when you take the pilgrimage and there's that black rock the black stone that people touch.
Yeah, at Mecca.
Yeah, at Mecca.
Yeah. Although the Irish also do the same thing with the Blarney Stone.
There's a Blarney Stone.
So that shuttle was called the Elbaz. Now, was there a thing was it the runabouts that were named after rivers?
They were all rivers, like the Yankees.
The runabouts were. But so the shuttles, I wonder if there's a thing about shuttles.
They
being
do
named
different
after
things in
people.
different places.
Yeah.
Like I think on lower decks, weren't they named after, what was it, trees or something? I think they were all
something like that.
There's usually a theme on the ship.
I think the TOS Enterprise, it was like a Copernicus and a Galileo.
This is that famous episode, the Galileo 7, where they're trapped on the planet.
You remember,
maybe I made up Copernicus, but there was definitely a Galileo.
Yeah, there was a guy named Galileo that did exist.
It's like how Doc Brown named his dog Einstein in 1985.
Right. I think I was just thinking of Doc Brown's dog.
But like in 1955, it's not Einstein.
Yeah, he's Copernicus.
But yeah, because I guess Einstein, it's weird. I guess they think Einstein's not. Einstein was famous by 1955.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe just not famous enough for Doc Brown. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
When Picard gets zapped,
anti-Semite.
When he gets zapped. First of all, why is that entity allowed to scan them, but they're not allowed to probe the entity?
Because it was supposed to be Q.
Yeah, okay. I guess there's really nothing I can say to that. So Picard got zapped, and Riker goes like a rag in a dog's mouth. And I'd never really thought of that expression, but I guess it's just when a dog thrashes its head about. But I never thought of a rag. I always thought of it as when a cute stuffy fluff toy. He should have said that, like a cute stuffy fluff toy in a dog's mouth.
Speaking of the shuttles,
I was doing that thing where I was running out of air. I was like, start talking like this because I'm running out of air.
Is that a thing you do?
Everyone does it.
Is that something you like to do? Do you like to be asphyxiated?
I was doing that because I couldn't stop myself.
Is this performative? Is this performative in some sort of...
Geordi goes up to the bridge and he's able to there's like a blank
He transfers-
panel, and
he-
it just
Sorry.
you can put like whatever on there. Like, what do they have on there? Like if other than engineering,
It's whatever you need it to be.
do they
baby.
show movies on there when Jordy's not up there? Like Jordy's not here; he's working on some shit. Let's just watch some movies.
They've just got Garth Marenghi's Dark Place in a loop on mute.
That's their TV where they get to watch the other part of the episode on.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, right.
But
yeah.
well, Jordy was saying, and I was asking about this with Dear Doctor about transferring over to the bridge. Jordy,
That's not unusual. You can do that on a naval ship.
But I'm saying, my point at the time was like, these are all digital. Why do they need to
Digital.
Why does it matter? But I understand separation of duties and all that. But duties, you got to separate your duties.
So don't. You put them in the toilet.
On the shelf, and then smell them, and then put them
Jesus Christ.
in your German, and then so.
What?
So
He's referencing the fact that some German people like to examine their stool, and so there are those German toilets that have the little poop shelf on them.
Yeah.
It's like in the toilet poop shelf. It's
So
not
when
a-
they're talking about shelf life, they mean something entirely different there. They mean the poop shelf. I'll put you
not-
on the poop shelf. That's what you tell people you're mad at. Instead of like, I'll throw you out the window, you say, I'll put you on the poop shelf.
Yes, that old German phrase, I'll put you on the poop shelf.
Yeah, you should say that in German when you visit.
I
a
don't
place
remember
like
the
that.
word for shelf.
Oh, then it's
But-
all for naught.
You were making some sort of point.
My point, yeah, thank you for helping me bring it home,
All
bring it back to the ranch. Geordi did that in this episode where he was like, transfer engineering to the bridge. He did that. And I was talking about earlier about like,
yeah,
that
when I
was
saw
weird.
it, I was thinking about you because you mentioned that in our discussion of Dear Doctor a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and so he to answer that kind of answers your question is they just take whatever duties they have anywhere they want on the ship,
Just
and they can watch
leave it off if you want.
and they can like watch videos of the other person's doing funny things when people are away, I guess.
But it can be like an extra.
But in the future, people
replicator, or it can be like an extra.
in the future people aren't entertained by other people like doing funny things in the future. They're
Well,
only-
not in the apparently not on the Enterprise D, on other, or at least in the 24th century, because we definitely see people entertaining themselves in the 23rd century
Totally,
and in the
yeah.
22nd century, because Discovery and Enterprise both have people watching movies.
Right, old movies.
But
from
like
on
the
Enterprise, they
20th
have movie
century.
night.
But I was thinking about how Phlox in that episode was talking about how making the joke. It's like his Cutler was saying to him, "Hey, Phlox, don't you have movies at home?" He's like, "We used to, but we got rid of them when we found out life was more interesting." Now, is that sort of like saying in the future life actually will be more interesting than TV, or are they just saying they're enlightened?
Well,
at
at the time, they were implying they were enlightened.
yeah, see, that's the thing.
I mean, well, one flavor of enlightened, if you consider that to be.
They said their
That's
own
exactly how I
lives.
felt,
They thought their
too.
own lives.
I don't
were
think
more-
you're necessarily enlightened. My argument is.
I thought that maybe things like going through space is just so fun that you would never even want to watch TV anymore.
you could watch TV shows about going through dimensions. Or something.
yeah, I mean,
don't
you
know,
got
something
to
else.
sit on the toilet sometimes.
Yeah, you do. You make an excellent point there, Dan.
What are you going to do on the toilet?
All right.
Do?
Other odds and ends. I think I was trying to say before, it took them a weirdly long time to discover that shuttle was a duplicate shuttle, right? They were all like, this says
were looking all over it.
1701D.
Wait a second.
It says number 5.
It's like, couldn't
Yeah.
you see that from over there? Like,
Didn't you
had
already
to
know
walk
the
up
name
it
to
says
it?
Elbaz.
Didn't you already know the name of your one ship and your like fucking
It
shuttle
was,
bay?
it was somewhat, and it kind of goes to what I was saying earlier about there seems to be some parts where they stretched it out.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I watched TNG, not from the initial, I started watching it probably in 1989.
I think that was
90, around
also in
this
part
time.
just to tell the audience, though, to point it out for the audience, obviously.
Well, yeah, of course. But
pandering to the audience, right?
Pandering's not even the right word. I guess it's a pretty good word, but I'm just like,
It's like they could have done it more compactly and more smartly, but they just chose to. They chose to make it all plotting. And
or they could have just been like, immediately been like, holy shit, that's the same shuttle as over there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. It just, I'm not going to say they padded it out, but I get the impression.
Padded it out.
I get the impression they padded it out a little bit. And maybe that kind
Edited
of,
it.
and when you consider the fact that the writer had a script, had a whole scene with Q, a whole deal with Q at the end, and then that's cut out by Roddenberry says no.
Why
so you
didn't-
can imagine the writer being like, well, fuck, I got to add like another 2 minutes to the episode.
Did Roddenberry not like Q that much or something?
No, Roddenberry came up with Q, as far as I know.
Then
Roddenberry was.
Then what the
Roddenberry
fuck
was-
does he care?
he didn't want him in this particular episode because Q is it Q Who that comes up soon? I think.
Yeah.
I forget if
believe
it's
so.
next episode or it's coming up real soon.
It's a couple ahead, yeah.
And I think the writer was thinking, hey, let's get, let's bring back Q for a bit here, and then we can have the full episode about Q. And Roddenberry was like, no, I want the surprise to be in that episode. And I can understand that argument. I can see that. I'm not going to second guess Roddenberry on that. But I also can recognize how a writer can both be aggravated and have difficulty coming up with being like, well, the whole story is kind of structured on this kind of surprise ending that I had in there, and now I've got to fluff it out a little bit.
And now it's not even the same story
It's
anymore.
not quite the same story. It changes the tenor of the story.
When they find the future Picard on the future shuttle, and then they try to communicate with the Picard. They're like, Captain, where are you? And he's like, well, where else should I be? I'm on the
Yeah. That was
he's all like annoyed. He's
yeah,
like, where should I be?
yeah, there's another smart ass Picard
It's like,
moment.
well, you're usually like at your ready room or like
Yeah, he was really is emotive
planet
the right
somewhere.
word? I don't know.
Early seasons Picard is a little bit more brusque.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
a little
cool.
more openly arrogant.
The music was weird because
the music is fucking great. It's all synth music.
Yeah, and that's what's awesome. All synth music, and it's all overly dramatic music sometimes. In the opening before the song and before the opening music, they go like Riker's like set course to intercept. Data says estimate intercept in 3 minutes, and then it goes intercept in 3
But
minutes, and we don't even know. There's nothing that indicates that it's the threatening. That's just this thing. It's like, hey, there's a thing over there. We'll be there in 3 minutes.
They went to a full orchestra in season 3, and so in season 1 and 2 they relied primarily, other than the opening and closing scene,
like the one with Trip Tucker and T'Pol, where they were greasing
without clothing.
So where they were getting the anti-sickness cream on each other.
Yes, I know the one you're talking about.
I know about that one.
But I think we discussed that in episode, what is that, like 5 of the podcast, probably?
Yeah.
Full circle, baby.
Probably.
Carter's like, you go far enough out,
the pilot episode.
You see
of
yourself
Enterprise.
again.
But
That's what's happening right now.
But they use that synth music, and I'm glad they went to the orchestration. I like the orchestration better in a lot of ways. However, I do love the weird vibe you get, because it does make this already kind of creepy and intense episode more so because of this crazy, obviously synth music. It's not even just that it's synth music. It's that they're using artificial style. They're not a lot of the instruments they're using are not meant to mimic real instruments. They're using weird space sounds and stuff like that. It gives it a distinctly different flavor to basically the remainder of Star Trek from then on forward through to today, where even though in Discovery in particular,
Through to today,
we're hearing some really interesting music, and a lot of it is synthetic, but it is nevertheless
you're playing that
a different
synthetic
vibe. You know, it's a
music.
more of an orchestral vibe to it, right?
Yeah, that's generally the case. You know, with a lot of music, earlier stuff in the 80s, it's got that sort of different. It just sounds like robot music.
And what's intriguing about this is we basically get 2 years of Star Trek that's like that, because TOS was all full orchestra. TNG season 3 onward and Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Enterprise onward are full orchestras, maybe in some cases helped along by some computer bits, but basically orchestral
I'm
styles.
thinking about this episode. There's an episode in like first season or something where something spooky is happening, and there's these like bell sounding synths going like doom 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 doom.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
You know,
about.
and it's like, yeah, I can't even imitate it right, but yeah, it's just,
Well, because
and
we're
it's
not
so
synths. We're not
synthy.
synths. We're not
Yeah,
synths.
we're not robot music.
We're not robots.
Yeah,
That's proof right there.
I'm a robot.
What's
What's a robot?
A
Robot.
Oh man! In last week's episode, there was a whole business about robots.
Oh, that's
because it was Ephraim and Dot that we discussed in last
Oh,
week's
right.
episode. So we kept talking about robots.
Oh yeah, we got really like fixated on that.
We got robotated.
Robotated.
Riker during breakfast mentions his father. Right? They're like something like, "Why do you know to
Oh,
cook?" And he's like, "Because my father was never home, so I had to cook myself or whatever."
The episode after this is
Exactly.
the one that deals with
with his father, and that was interesting because that reminded me how
That's right, that's the next
in Voyager. I forget the name of the Voyager episode we saw where Dear
Timeless?
Doctor, Dear
Oh,
Doctor,
Dear Doctor.
and what was the alien?
No,
that,
Dear Doctor is the Enterprise episode. You're talking about
Message in a Bottle.
Message in a
A
Bottle.
Message in a Bottle,
where
yeah,
the Doctor
yeah,
goes to
yeah.
the Alpha Quadrant.
Yes. So what was that other species of aliens that we get introduced to?
The Hirogen.
The Hirogen, right. And so just like he mentions his father in this episode, and then we go to his father next episode, in that one, we see the Hirogen for the first time, and then lo and behold, it's like the big plot for the next episode.
Right.
So it's like interesting
Yeah.
one episode setup for the next week's thing, which when I was watching at the time, I didn't notice stuff like that. I did know it's like, oh, I remember maybe they mentioned that sometime, but I don't know, but it just didn't
You
occur
can
to me.
see where they were setting things
Yeah,
up.
Yeah.
And I agree that as much as I've watched every TNG episode many times, right? But as you get older and as you start looking at things in a more structured way, you do start to notice these things a little bit more clearly. I think especially since we're so familiar now with serialized TV where the point of it is to pay attention and get the clues. So we're getting the clues that we missed before.
And we think of how TNG, we're like, well, TNG is not serial.
It's parallelized.
It's not serial, whatever.
It's episodic.
Episodic, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so Star Trek, we always think of TNG as episodic, which it is, but then we also talk about it's episodic, but there's elements that themes that
flavor
live,
bits.
and it's stuff like that kind of plant it in your head sometimes, and maybe it's like you don't realize it at the time.
And they know because they know enough. The next episode is the Icarus Factor, right? Isn't that what it is?
Yeah,
the Icarus Factor with his dad, where they do that weird judo, where they're all talking about how dangerous it is, but it doesn't look that dangerous when they're jousting. They're all like, "Oh, you should."
Well, they got
do
special
that.
Suits on, right?
Oh man, I can't remember. It had such a funny name that particular. They called it a martial art. Some sort of space martial art.
Oh, that's right. They did have some space martial art. Zero G fighting. That'd be crazy
with their little business. But to add on to this particular conversation about the ongoing stuff that you didn't notice when in your first few watch throughs of TNG are things like background characters, right? Like, so we know about Nurse Ogawa and certain background characters that are a little bit more prominent. You wouldn't even necessarily call them background characters, or like
O'Brien,
tertiary characters. O'Brien definitely starts out like that and then grows.
O'Brien and Pulaski both watched the after effect of Picard being murdered. They both saw that.
Yeah, they're both fucked up.
They know that about
O'Brien's always fucked up by shit.
Yeah, and you're not allowed to talk about that fact that Picard murdered someone.
He just phases himself.
Picard he's like, come down to the shuttle bay or whatever, but he doesn't stick around. He's just like, no, I'm going to the bridge.
Yeah, he's
like,
also shady.
You guys deal with it.
He's so shady.
Clean his shit up.
He's like, okay, don't come
Doctor,
in.
tend to your patient.
It's like, it's like, don't come in here. Don't come in here. Don't bother me. Okay, now I'm done my business. And I was like, okay, come in. And then you leave.
And if you make the assumption he knew the other Picard was dead, then him saying, doctor, tend to your patient is some real fucked up shit.
He's being a dick.
I shot him.
Yeah.
But there was something I found out only today that I did not know before, and I love this. Right? Because I always try to look at, are there any special guests or are there any actors that we should be familiar with in terms of their other work in Star Trek? And I knew this was a fairly contained episode, so I wasn't expecting to find special guests, but I always look just in case. And I saw a name that jumped out at me because I was like, I recognize that name. Why do I recognize
You sound like Jim Gaffigan.
I don't wear blue. I don't wear blue. I don't say fuck.
I don't say fuck. The burger is so weird.
I like Jim Gaffigan.
Yeah, he's really funny.
I don't mean to, he's brilliant, actually. I don't mean to mock him. But,
yeah, he's really funny.
But the name was Guy Vardaman.
Guy Vardaman.
And
that's a fucking warrior's name.
It is a fucking warrior's name. I agree. And I was like, why do I recognize
like
that name?
Mad Mardigan.
And I know why now I recognize
Kel
his name.
Varnson.
It's because it's one of those names you keep seeing as you're researching episodes. Keep seeing pop up because this guy. All right, get a load of this. This guy, he played Darian Wallace in this episode, and it turns out that Darian Wallace is a background character who was on TNG basically throughout the entire run of TNG and into he was even in the movie Generations, right? So he's just like an Enterprise D background character. And he also often served as a hand model. Right, so when they do
model,
when they do like close-up shots where you just see a hand.
They have their own hand models and on TV shows. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So like
it's stunt hands.
Well, it's because like if somebody's touching a control panel, or pushing buttons or something like that, then
that was his hand.
Not always, but there were many instances where it was his hand actually doing that. Because why bring the actor in to shoot that insert shot, right? But not only was he a regular background character who had a name, Darian Wallace, and a hand model, he also served as Gene Roddenberry's research assistant until Gene Roddenberry died. He continued on the show well after that, but he was the person Roddenberry would have task him with various things to look up, and he would go to the library or wherever, go to the Paramount, whatever, and look up whatever it was that Roddenberry was
Krell
looking for him.
Varnson, what's his name?
Krell Vardigan?
Yeah, I know. It's Guy Vardaman. What did you say?
Vardaman.
Krell Varnison? So Vardaman, he
Shoot some Varnus and eat it later.
and he played a bunch of other characters as well. He played various aliens here and there. He was also Data's photo stand-in. So he would oftentimes, if you see Data from the back, or if they needed somebody to stand in the spot where Brent Spiner would be for the blocking while they're rehearsing a shot or something or setting up the camera, that was his job. So this guy was all over the place, particularly on TNG, which I think I love reading about that. Oh, and most importantly, when I looked this guy up, I found him on Memory Alpha. And Memory Alpha has this thing for all the characters where they have a whole section that's memorable quotes. They have that for the episodes and they have that for the characters. And you've got all your, Worf would be like, I guess today is a good day to die. That sort of stuff, right? It's a long list of quotes. For Guy Vardaman's character of Darian Wallace, the memorable quotes section has 2 entries. The first entry is, "Aye, sir." And the second entry is "good." Which I think might be the extent of all his quotes.
That's great. He owns those. He owns those quotes now. Though he owns he
6
owns
or 7
good.
seasons of the show. And
every time
the
you say
movie.
good, you have to credit him. You have to be like, I got that from.
It's like that
And by the
lady
way-
that was the cashier in Seinfeld at the diner, and she was just always in the background.
Yeah, and this guy, the line "good," he says that in the next phase. Right, which we discussed. I don't know, what was that? 4 or 5 weeks ago or something. Not too long ago, we discussed the next phase.
Oh, yeah.
Scroll down the podcast list and you'll find it. So you can keep an eye out for Darian Wallace.
He's gonna be a big one.
He's like a handsome looking fella.
gonna be
Just
a
look
big
out
one.
for a handsome looking fella who says "good" in the next phase. In this episode, I don't think he says anything. I think he's just standing there.
There was another person I saw in the credits. I don't remember the first name, but the last name was. And they're going places. Probably it was someone Snodgrass.
Oh yeah.
That's one of the producers.
Yeah,
right?
Was it
Snodgrass.
Emily Snodgrass?
Melinda.
That sounds right.
Melinda Snodgrass.
Sure, I knew it was a.
Something like
I know it was a traditionally feminine sounding name.
Yeah,
It's a traditional-
I believe she did several
Yes.
Star Treks.
Traditionally. All right. Any other odds and ends before we
Hell
close
no,
things
that's
down?
it, man.
No,
Jesse's exhausted all his odds and ends, but Dan is typing away furiously.
Exhausted in general.
No,
on his
I
computer
was-
notes.
So I'm always like looking at the star dates. Right?
Always.
And so the star date for this episode is 42679.2. The point 2 is what you have to remember. Then we find
All
out
right,
that
we're marking that down. Point 2.
and then for future Picard P2, he comes from a time with star date. They say this 42679.5. That's a difference of 0.3. So 6 hours in the future is 0.3 star dates. So I guess you could use that to figure out what star dates to maybe they
Crack the code, Dan.
because I've never actually looked on the internet. It's so easy for me to do it, and I haven't. Like how to work star dates, because someone's got some shit on how that shit
I'm sure
works.
there's a multiple.
Oh, there is.
Because there's no way to make them all actually work because they're inconsistent.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Is there's probably inconsistent rules, but that seems like a pretty solid.
Even when they were trying to do it right, there's still inconsistency.
But according to this, 0.3
point 3
star dates.
Point 3.
0.3 star dates is equal to 6 hours of us time. So
right.
just use that for math.
So that I think should do it for this entertaining, if a little bit rough around the edges.
That's what you said about last podcast.
No, not the podcast, the episode.
The episode.
Oh,
no, the
they said
podcast was
Podcast is
smooth.
brilliant, as always.
Okay, never mind.
As always, one might presume
Finely
that once in a
polished
while, I mean, you're just going to have a dud here and there. One might presume that, but
I like those odds.
But
But
as
it just hasn't happened yet.
as our audience knows, I mean, we're on episode 90, and not a single episode is a dud.
Feeling findy.
Can you imagine that? Not one single
Not
episode is below a 10 rating on a scale of 1 to 10.
I sure can't think of one off the top of my head.
Not a single one.
Not a single one.
Not a single one.
No way, man.
All right, and we
100%.
encourage new listeners to go back and listen to our back catalog and confirm that for yourselves. And if you disagree,
They've already done that.
you can contact us at, what was it again?
Go fuck yourself.
feedback at itsgotstartrek.com. That's the email address for you old-fashioned types. For your newfangled types, you kids that are too young to be listening to this, but listening anyway.
Because they're naughty.
We're not on TikTok.
They're on Santa's naughty list.
And we're not on Glibglab.
They're not getting any presents. They're getting
Isn't
coal. in their
TikTok
stocking.
like a minute or
for
something?
listening to us?
We never make it on TikTok.
You're thinking of the Vines or whatever they're called.
Those are the same thing.
I don't know what.
Yeah,
the
it's the
hell
same
all the
thing.
same thing.
It was
Short
ridiculous when
videos.
Vines went out of business because it was so popular. They just probably had poor business or something, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
what happens in the world, you know? That's the
someone else
dot-com
took over.
bubble all over again. Another thing that these kids don't know about. They didn't have to live through the dot-com bubble. Everyone's always talking about September 11th, but what about the dot-com bubble?
When that bubble burst.
Or the Y2K.
And when
oh, fuck Y2K. Shit, that was some terrifying shit.
and when people were like saying like Amazon selling books online, whatever, and then like
whatever. Books online.
What? Nobody would even want to do that when you can go to a store.
Yeah, you can just walk into the store.
Until this kills.
You can just buy a book. You can drive. You can get in the car and drive to the store.
Why would I do that? Why would I order it?
You can go look around the bookstore and then not find the book you want, and then go talk to the person at the desk, and they're confused about which book you're looking for, and then they say it's on back order.
And then you leave and you think they really have that book back there somewhere.
Yeah,
They got coffee though at the bookstore.
yeah, that's pretty tight. But you can get coffee through Amazon too.
Yeah, you can just go get coffee from your kitchen.
It's a terrifying.
You can walk into
fact, but it's convenient.
You can walk into a store, grab a bunch of shit, and leave, and you're not stealing because it just charges your card.
Oh, those new Amazon stores. Oh yeah, we were talking about the TikTok and the other stuff you guys derailed.
Talking
me.
about the TikTok.
Talking about the TikTok
and the
business.
Vines.
Stop talking.
But we're not on that. We're on. We don't have a Vine. We don't have TikTok. But we do have Twitter at It's Got Star
We don't
Trek.
have a Vine.
We have
kids.
We have ask your grandparents about Vine. We have Instagram at It's Got Star Trek. We are on Facebook at It's Got Star Trek, or just type in It's Got Star Trek. We're on YouTube, and an increasing number of people are enjoying watching, or I should say, listening to our podcast while watching a static image
Spotify.
on YouTube. So
I came home the other day and my wife was watching us on Spotify.
you keep saying watching. You can't watch anything on Spotify.
But it's on a screen.
So yeah, I know what you mean.
Something is on a screen.
Something's on a screen. Yeah, but okay.
She was staring at the screen.
So I guess it's the same thing. So Spotify,
But it's like might as well
YouTube,
be off, right?
Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the popular podcast providers you can find us, which you probably know because you're listening to us right now, unless you came to the website, www.itsgotstartrek.com, which is possible. Or maybe you just didn't know that because you don't usually listen to the end of the episode, which means you miss out on the fun little bonus.
Maybe
little
you watch
bonus clip that happens at the end of every episode of the podcast.
There's a bonus clip.
There's always a bonus clip.
Yeah,
at the
you're
end of
just
the
not
episode.
in.
There's always a funny bonus clip at the end of the
Funny
episode.
bonus.
And part of the fun
I got a
is
funny
guessing.
bonus.
Is guessing as,
Yep.
as the listener.
Guessing
they can
what's
engage in
funny
the
about
podcast.
it.
They can be like, which clip are they going to pick? Which clip are they going to pick to play at the end of the podcast?
Which
that's
clip
funny,
they're gonna pick.
and it's really hard sometimes to pick a clip that's funny when some of the episodes are deeply tragic. And
Don't I
upsetting.
know it, Patrick?
So listen to the end to hear the clip. That's the prize you get for hearing us and incessantly talk about
The best
Twitter
kind
and
of
Instagram
prize is a surprise. Hey, this episode was all about, you know.
Best kind of prize
you-
is an enterprise.
You ever hear that? That's true. You ever hear that thing about people talking about doing the same shit over and over again, expecting different results? And like, I always thought that was funny because they say that's the definition of insanity, but that's not the I mean, who says that's the definition of insanity? That's not
think
what's
Einstein
in the book.
might have said it.
Yeah, I think maybe Einstein said that or something. That's what I hear. So
It's science talk, man.
that's like that's what time travel episodes are right?
Yeah,
They're just
right,
like
right.
a bunch of like you know, doing the same thing over and over again.
Right. I think people are going to feel like they've traveled through a significant amount of time listening to this.
Hey, you're the one.
No, it's
One
all
and the
good.
one.
It's all good.
You're one and then the two with the three.
It'll get edited
but
out.
B edited out.
It's gonna get edited out.
It's all good. We'll cut this down to a nice clean 20 minutes.
Podcast got
Yeah.
edited out.
Clean, sleek, 20 minutes.
But as a
That's what
reminder,
some shows do.
Dan got edited
next
out.
week we are going to be discussing the first two episodes of Lower Decks season 2, whatever they were called, Strange Energies and
Spencer and Frankie.
something about
Something
Spencer and-
Kayshon, his eyes open, which
Spencer and Frankie.
that's the one I'm intrigued by. But anyway, you'll hear from us approximately the same time next week on the same podcast feed that you've been used to all these years. And that does it. I got nothing else. You got anything else, guys?
That's it for us.
All right, that's gonna do it. Well, you'll hear from us
Right, you are, Patrick.
next week.
Beat-up-up-up-up.
A cook is only as good as his ingredients.
Delicious.